So I was having a conversation last night with one of my students who happened to be in town, and it got me to thinking, a lot of you out there are simply concerned that without certifications you don't have a business. And I'm here to tell you this is far from the truth. And it seems like people are scaring you, similar to what I had experiences with my military friends that were scared to leave the military because they were like, hey, there's no jobs out there in the civilian world. It seems like everyone out here is terrified that there's no contracts that don't require certifications. Today's video, we're gonna discuss all the different types of opportunities. I'm gonna name 5 here that I have on my phone, specifically where you can get involved with that doesn't require certification. So if you're interested in hearing about that, stay tuned for this video because we're gonna talk about 5 different business opportunities that you can get into to sell directly to the US government that don't require certifications. Let's go. So the first thing, as I was speaking to my student and also to a potential funding provider, was product sales. Many of you want to sell products anyways. You want to use DLA and DIBBS, or you want to use Nico systems, or you want to sell using the other system online. I forget the name of it. But either way, it's where you go out and you secure products. Again, going back to state and local governments do this all the time. Well, if you go through DLA and DIBBS, that doesn't require any certifications. That is simply you scouring the website, looking for products, finding suppliers and vendors that can actually provide those products, giving them a price, putting your markup on it, and then when you win the bid, you deliver those things. A lot of you guys like that anyways, that middleman strategy. So for me, the first thing that you can do is just sell products to the government. Again, that middleman strategy doesn't require certifications. There is no certifications needed, and it's part of the process to just go to the lowest vendor. So if you have the lowest price, or if you work out relationships with suppliers that have low prices, then you can simply do product sales. And this is not impacted by all the things that people are afraid of. So that is number 1, is just do product sales. As you know, we've had several people come on my show recently that talked about DLA DIBBS, like Mike Cantavi was the first one, but then his son Dave Cantavi came on. Many of my students are in his programs. And then the DLA guru, Coffie, was on my program as well, talking about how to sell programs, how to sell products to the government. And he's got programs and masterminds and trainings, all of them do, to how to do that. In fact, one of our other coaches and mentors is coming out with a program specifically on DLA, but it's not DIBBS. So this is DLA TIS program, which is, again, selling products to the government. Now, in this particular course that will be coming out soon, that we'll be releasing, it's designed for people who are particularly veterans, or that you were served in the military, or you have access to military bases, because the premise behind it is that you have clearance and access to get on a base. So then what you do is you get on the base and you go talk to the facility guys about what are some of the things that they need that they're not getting orders for, and then you help them put a price together. You put it into the DLA system, you give it a code, and then you are typically the only supplier that knows how to deliver that item. So it's a different form of sole sourcing, but again, none of this requires certifications. The premise of this video today is to talk about why is it that for some strange reason, people feel as though the only way to make money selling to the federal government is through certifications. And I want to dispel that in today's video. So I've given you 2 examples of selling products, both using DLA, different methodologies, and I've given you 3 coaches that you can turn to here, boom, 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 that can teach you how to do it. And 2 of them have mentorship programs, and we've done more than 5 videos on the subject on our YouTube channel. I'll post them below in the thread. So again, first thing is product sales, specifically DLA. We've got Unison Marketplace, again, another source that you can just basically go on there, see bids, respond to the bids, give pricing, and then you win the bid. Nothing to do with certifications. In fact, we have a student who has been extremely successful at being able to figure out the Unison Marketplace and how to navigate it and find opportunities that come up for recompete or rebid. And so using that as a formula for how they're able to identify opportunities that may have less bidders. But again, in the very beginning, when I started doing government contracting, one of my friends did $50,000 a year in Unison Marketplace. It had a different name back then, but it was the same marketplace, where it was just essentially like a reverse marketplace where you go on there, you register, and when you register on there, it has all these different items that you can provide, and then you submit pricing. Again, No certification needed, no certification required to do that. Now, let's get into more complicated things, right? So for example, we all know what's happening right now with the new mandates coming down from the new administration, specifically targeting immigrants and people that are here illegally at moving them from here to other places. Well, all of that requires logistics. So believe it or not, there's a lot of logistics companies that are getting business because we've got to not, when we take these people and they are now taking them from wherever they're hauling them from. I've heard New Jersey. I know here in Delray Beach they've had some raids. But either way, those people have to be transported places. They've got to be put into facilities. They've got to be shipped off and put on planes. All that is logistics. Now, it may go against your ethical compass or your moral compass because you feel like you don't want to be a part of that. However, the purpose of this video is to talk about opportunities, right? And so for me, I'm not here to decide on whether or not you agree or disagree with that. We know going back to like the 1950s and people didn't like the different wars that we went into, and so they didn't want to participate. But the point of this is more of showing you opportunities that exist that don't require certification. So all of this logistics that's happening, I remember the last time with the previous administration, I remember people that got into this organization, they bought companies that were logistics companies that were doing this simply because they knew that the uptick in contracts and opportunities would exist and the current amount of vendors that were there that were servicing it, that they couldn't meet the demand. And so I know people that specifically got into this business for the purposes of logistics. Now, we could go a step further in logistics and talk about actually housing of the people. And so that is another form of logistics where the people have to be put in temporary housing and temporary facilities and setting those up and what that looks like. All of that requires people putting together, coordinating efforts and putting those facilities together, moving people from the facilities. And then one of my students is in the catering business where for the last several years, he's been catering to people that were on the borders. So for many of us out here, particularly minority groups, we like things like catering. So that brings me up to my fourth item, which is catering. And so you can get into catering because, again, we are not just housing people and providing logistics to them, but they are being fed as well. So I know for a fact, because we have a very successful student, that if you go back in some of my historical content, talks about doing catering specifically at the borders, right? At the borders. He's been doing this since I've met him, and then he's joined some organizations, and now his business has won some awards simply from providing catering services to people at the border. So again, now maybe that might not be as lucrative today. However, the same catering applies to people that we're housing and providing facilities for, and that we're getting in these temporary locations. Again, one of the things that I think that we don't realize is that whenever the pendulum swings one way, there's a lot of outpour from that. And so you need to look at where are the efforts being exerted from the administration and what types of businesses, opportunities come out of that. And so again, if you're seeing these things, rather than saying, well, this is wrong or you don't agree with it, I mean, you could do that too, but I'm looking at it from a standpoint of, okay, what opportunities are coming out of this that the government needs? And so for many of you guys out here, I know people have asked me a long time, well, Eric, I got box trucks, I've got refrigerated trucks, I've got these types of things. Are you talking to the people who are providing the facilities? Where are they buying all the food from? Where are they buying the goods from? How are they managing the facilities? How are they servicing these facilities? So again, there's a lot of things that go into transporting thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people from place to place. There's a lot that goes into processing those people, right? There's temporary facilities that are being set up. There's power generations that have to go in, how the facilities power, where is that coming from? Is it temporary housing? Are they being put in tents? Like a lot of things that we don't think about comes directly from the results of decisions that are being made by administration. Unfortunately, I think what happens is a lot of times people don't agree with what's happening, but what you fail to understand is that all administrations, right, have done things that we don't agree with, and people are still contracting to do those services. So regardless of how you feel about the situation, the services are still going to get done. And so again, going back to the point of the video is to talk about opportunities for people who are already servicing or in these industries to look at how do I or my company take advantage of this, and how do we support the new mission, right? A lot of folks who were in the military know that they're used to taking orders. And so when you take orders, whether you agree with it or not, you take the orders, you carry out the orders, you carry out the mission. So this is the same way that I look at it, is from having to be a government contractor, if that's something that I do, I carry out the mission. Again, everyone has the right to choose to do things that they don't want to do. They feel like it might be unethical. You have that right. But again, we want to talk about that. Now, let's talk about some other things that may not be borderline unethical, and you may feel like you're supporting your country. Cybersecurity, AI, right? Let me tell you how you can find out some of the opportunities. So a lot of people already know about the forecast list, so we've talked about forecast lists. And that may go out the window now only because from some of the meetings that I've already had with people in different facilities, the forecast list of opportunities that we had in the books before, the priorities are going to change with the current administration, so that may go out the window. However, but if you want to get an idea of what are some of the underlying needs, you can search through what's called combatant command needs. And so I have it right here on my phone, and you could go through and search what's called combatant command needs. And when you search that, you could do 2020, right? Just for example, I've got up here 2020 combatant command needs. And in here, what you'll see is a list of, right, different categories on the left-hand side, columns. And then at the top, we'll tell you the different combatant commands. Now, it doesn't matter if you know what a combatant command is or not. It doesn't matter. The point is, here is listing out the areas where the government's looking for assistance in helping them protect the warfighter and fight against our adversaries. And so, for example, I'm reading USA African. It says, buy multilateral sharing networks for classified and ISR data, biometrics analysis, and intelligence data fusion. Again, I don't do that, but there's somebody out here that does do that doesn't know that this opportunity exists, and they don't know who should talk to and where to go. I'm looking at U.S. Central Command, information sharing data, management, compression and processing information sharing, multi-domain, cross-domain assurance. Again, if this is something that you do, reach out to me. I know how to connect with the people who are making decisions about these opportunities, but this is stuff that we're going to need regardless of the administration, because this is how we protect our freedoms. This is how we allow the average American to sleep at night and not worry about what's happening in the background. So just, again, this is a 2020 list. I don't know if they have an updated list, but I pull this up just to give examples, right? These are examples of where opportunities exist that have nothing to do with certifications. Improve interoperability with partner and allied capabilities. Cyber COP, capability providing SOCOM freedom of action. Let's see, I'm going to go to another page because again, there's different categories. Let's look at force protection here. So force protection, medical, extend golden hour, provide remote medical care in austere environments, automate medical care monitoring during patient transport via unmanned systems. All right, so if you're in the medical care industry, that makes sense. That one was for a central command, in case you want to know. Rapid response to pandemic influenza, infectious disease occurrence, chemical biological weapon, preparedness, and protection. Again, opportunities exist for people. Now, that's just me pulling on this list. There's lots. I mean, this thing has, let's see, it's got 1, 2, 3. It's like 6 columns. And then there's probably, 15 rows at the top. So lots of different boxes here to look at. And so that's just one way to start searching for opportunities. Now, let's talk about some other places where I've been told, and just to give you some things that people have talked to me about in the past. So I've got a friend of mine who, and again, remember, this is to get the brain working about how to consider things that you may not have considered in the past, how to look at things that you may have not looked at in the past. Now, I know, again, a lot of people in here are construction, IT, right, janitorial, and things like that. But there's other areas out here that exist in the world that are beyond that. So we talked about some IT examples, cybersecurity firms. I was talking to one of my friends today who does security services at the VA hospital, and he's done a lot of that type of work. And so again, these are people that I know of that are doing this kind of work. There's people that I know that do testing services, right? There's people that do things called pen testing. There's testing for the systems that have to be connected to the government's devices. None of that stuff is going away. There's people that run call centers, and so that's not going away because, again, responding to public needs and how do we deal with those issues. Like, all these things exist. We mentioned a little medical care, healthcare suppliers, right? We're still servicing all of our veterans. We're still servicing our military hospitals. All of those things that I know for a fact. There's a conference coming up, and I think it's Denver, Colorado. That's the military medical conference. And if you are in the medical field or you're a supplier to that industry, that's a good event for you to go to find out what are their needs in that space. One of my students who was on a recent video, he started off selling medical devices to the government Now he's got much bigger contracts and much broader contracts, but that was his entrance into this market. You might want to go back and watch the video I did with Uban. And so that's an example. Office supplies, industrial supplies. Again, with all the people going back to the office, right? They're going to have, like, those offices are now going to need to be maybe refurbished. They're going to need furniture going in there. They're going to need supplies being delivered. They might even need food services being delivered to those offices, right? So think about if everyone has got to go back to the office and we've got, you know, I don't know, 500 people or 1,000 people that you know of in your areas where there was no one servicing those offices. Well, the people that are now, what about all, before the offices were full, what were all the things that people need going to those offices, right? And what did that look like? Again, just giving people different ways to think about the opportunities. And then I want to give you an example that a friend of mine that I was talking about yesterday. And just to kind of give people an example, because I know people have short attention spans, maybe you didn't make it to the end, which is fine. So for those of you who made it all the way this far, let's talk about what's really happening out here. So there is this huge wealth transfer that's happening, right? If you haven't looked it up, look it up, right? There's this huge wealth transfer. I think it's $20 trillion. The numbers vary, 12 trillion, whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of people, particularly baby boomers, that have businesses that are aging out and they want to sell those businesses. Well, the SBA has programs, particularly the SBIC program, and then we can get into some of the loan programs, but particularly those programs, again, I don't know why the government's not teaching this stuff, but you can look it up for yourself. It's called SBIC. You can Google it, and you'll see a list of companies on there that provide financing for people that want to buy some of these businesses. Now, there is also the 7A loan, which is a very common loan product that people know of, and I would encourage you, if you're thinking about using a 7A loan, you could go to the SBA website, and you could pull down all of these 7A loan banks, and you can see who are the top loan providers for these types of loans to help you buy businesses, and reach out to them to talk about some of the past deals, some of the past opportunities they've seen. I know of, particularly just again through friends and people that I know because I'm very well networked, there are people that are doing this every single day. And so they're buying these boomer businesses, and many of them sell to the government. And so they're buying these boomer businesses using SBIC money and using 7A loan products, right? Again, all this products, you can go through the SBA because it's government funded. You can go and see the different companies who are getting these programs, and they're buying these businesses that are already selling to the government. And so again, because they're boomer businesses, they're not tied to any type of certification. I'll give you an example of one for all of my people who decided to stay this long to the video. So an example of something that a friend of mine told me about was his friend exited his business that sold these old airplanes that the government had from like the 80s. Well, there wasn't a lot of them still around, but they were still being used in service. And the companies that would manufacture them in the past sold him the production lines to keep making the parts to keep those planes valid. So, for example, you could do a quick Google search or ChatGPT search or whatever the new one is, DeepSeek, if you like DeepSeek now. You could do a quick search and see what are some of the old planes that the government still has in use. And you'll see, like, we've still got some of these planes in use. And what he did was he actually bought some of the manufacturing lines for some of those components, right? And because those planes were no longer being made anymore, then the company that used to make that stuff were able to sell him those lines cheap, right? Because the planes aren't made anymore, so there were no more planes made. However, because the government still had a lot of those old planes, right? Then guess what? They were the ones that made the components to support the government's inventory of planes that still existed. Well, that number turned out to be big enough to where they end up selling that company for a 9-figure exit. Now, you can still do this today. I have a friend of mine that works for an aviation company that's publicly traded, and they have different manufacturing lines for components that they sell to the different manufacturers like Boeing and Lockheed and all these people that get these bigger defense contracts. Well, they have the intellectual property, the IP. They've got the actual lines that they have available, and you can buy these things from them because depending upon the companies are separating to increase profitability for because they're publicly traded for their investors, and so maybe that particular line is dragging it down because it's not as profitable because maybe it's doing $5 or $10 million. Well, a person like you or I, $5 or $10 million business, again, for something that they have to buy from you because you're the only one that makes it, is a very lucrative business. even if you're talking about $5 to $10 million where you're spitting out 20%, that is what, $1 million, and on $10 million, what is that, $2 million? That's a great business. Again, remember what I said at the beginning of this video. Ideas of what you can do that's not related to certifications. My whole premise, everything that I do is to help you to think differently about it, not to just because the people that you're talking to, everyone that you know and your your immediate sphere of influence is saying, well, now that these certifications are gone, there's no opportunities for me. No, there's opportunities because the government owns planes and tanks and ships and boats and helicopters. All those things have to be serviced. All those things require maintenance. All those things require parts. A lot of those things are tied to computers and chips that have software upgrades and patches. A lot of this stuff in terms of the things that we own, I forgot what the number was, but I believe the government owned something like 4 billion pieces of equipment, something crazy like that. You can look up the stat, right? And so all that stuff has to be maintained and serviced and has to be moved from place to place. And so again, I know of friends of mine personally that when COVID happened, they were testing. They did a mobile COVID testing company. There's a buddy of mine that I grew up with that I knew from elementary school, like one of my first childhood friends, that he went into a business to do a mobile COVID testing, and he got to the point where he was doing testing astronauts and stuff before they went up to space. Nothing to do with certifications. He had the right business at the right time that was able to deliver a service on demand to meet the government's needs. So think about that. What kind of service can you do on demand to meet the government's needs? You might have a food truck and you might be like, look, you can take your food truck to the locations where the detention centers are at and provide food and meals to all the people at the detention centers because you've got a food truck and you can actually prepare the meals and cook them right there on the spot. I don't know, but the point is to think creatively, to think outside the box, and to look at ways in which you can help instead of be critical and just condemning what's happening out here. Again, I'm going to always look at the cup half full. This is not a political ploy. I'm not partisan. I'm just saying from the standpoint of capitalism, because we all live in a capitalistic society in this country, and a stability of an entrepreneur and somebody who wants to work hard and be able to deliver goods and services and help, right, in our country, this is what's going to happen. None of my friends that I know that are successful entrepreneurs have given up on government contracting. None of them have quit government contracting. And so for me, when I'm saying, why should you quit before you start? Because you're putting the cart before the horse. And why should you be limited in your ideas and your thinking only because you've not been exposed to more things? So talk to positive people, talk to successful people, talk to people who are doing big numbers, right? Come to places like that where I'm going to so you can meet those people so you can have a different type of insight and also understand what possibilities exist. Expand your mind further, have more ideas, and be able to now think of creative ways to do this. And again, if you want to hear more about SBIC programs or 7A loans, about buying businesses, reach out to me. Because again, I have friends that do this. They have active strategies. I've watched some of my friends' companies grow and double in size since I've known them personally. And we're talking about double in size 9 figures. I'm sorry, 8 figures, excuse me, 8 figures. That they're headed to 9 figures. And so we know that this is possible and this is happening, and they're still doing it right now as you are sitting back on your computer, on your couch complaining and playing whack-a-mole with the stupid television show and watching the news and being sidetracked from pursuing your greatest gifts and using your talents to help protect your family and make sure that there's a moat built around them so forever. You say you want generational wealth, you say you want to do this, but at the same time, you're sitting back and you're complaining and you're doing nothing but being critical and critiquing and saying, well, certifications are dead, so there's no more opportunities. That's a lie. To me, certifications, in a lot of ways, the way that they wrapped up and they presented to people was like that was the only way for small businesses and for minorities to succeed. And it's far from the truth, because I know a lot of people that have succeeded regardless of certifications or not. And I know a lot of people that succeed and that actually want to get rid of some of these certifications because they hinder them from growing and scaling as opposed to helping them. So just think there's always two sides of the coin. Be more open, be more receptive, and be more accepting and willing to hear other ideas. So I bid you good luck in 2025. You're gonna hear more from me. My goal was to focus on more contracts and less content, but I'm hearing so much rhetoric that I had to say this and I had to come up with this message because I'm just very frustrated with what I'm hearing out there. So I had to come back and say some things to counter all the silliness and the nonsense I'm hearing, because I truly believe in it. In fact, so much so that I'm having my conference again November 5th, 6th, 7th. And so I'm planning on making it even bigger, more expansive. We're looking at hotels right now, so you'll hear more about the GCG Summit coming up. But I'm doubling down. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm going to be investing. I'm going to be putting down my deposit for my conference, and I'm going to be committing to the fees of doing an event. So if I'm willing to do that, I'm showing you by actually writing my checks, not by just running my mouth. So good luck, and I'll see you guys in the next video. God bless.